Geekly! This week, we're talking about the 2023 Tony Awards. We're going to talk about Sympathy Pains, and we're each going to have a rad thing. And now your host, Mike Indeglio.
What is up, team? Welcome to K&M Geekly, just a sneak peek at two geeks talking about some of the things, getting them through the week, because it is Monday. My name is Mike Indeglio. That is my only friend, Keith Varney.
Oh, no. I thought we were going to end depressed.
We are.
We're going to start depressed.
We are. It's been a week. But we are back, canned. And we were live last week. Thanks for sifting through 2.5 hours of us just talking about stuff. But I guess that's really what you come here for. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for being a part of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Keith, how you doing this week so far, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Like, you know, it's warm. It's heating up here in New Jersey. I spent yesterday trying to rescue my front lawn, which the soil here is bad. It's like clay, and it also has direct sunlight, so it just gets baked and crispy of just random weeds. So I decided to put down a new layer of topsoil and reseed it for reasons I don't understand, but I don't know. It was like it's a thing to do. It's a
great thing to do. CEO Chancellor Jen has taken to building out a little garden in the front of our apartment here. Even though it's beautiful. They have landscapers that come and do this stuff, but if they notice that you've taken a hands-on approach, they back off.
Good for them.
And she's gotten little gnomes and she's gotten little bird houses and things. But here's the thing: the deer, they just come and eat everything. And then she feels distraught, and so today she's quit on the garden, but I give it till about, another 20 minutes, and she'll be out there trying to rescue. So, hey, you know what? A bit of earth, Keith. That's all they ask, a bit of earth.
Yeah, well, when a thing is wick, it's got a life about it.
Now, friends joining in, you might not know, we don't talk about it too often, but Keith and I truly started the K&M Empire. Do you have any recollection of as to when that was, really?
Oh, talk for a second. I bet I can look it up.
Yeah, so we started our initial podcast way back on Broadway in Queens.
In Queens.
Yep, that was part of the theme song, which may be Keith's best work, but I don't know that we've ever played it on the pod. Today might be the day.
I feel like we have.
But it was pretty good. It was maybe not anyway, we did like a live podcast about musical theater, and we really went for it. But it was analog.
It was bad.
Yeah,
it was bad.
Keith's Pro Tools box. What were those boxes? What was that called? The M box.
The M box. We had an M box.
We ran like 30 microphones into it, and we would have live guests on who would play their new and upcoming musical theater works. Almost exclusively, every person who appeared on our podcast, Keith, has gone on to a very successful career.
Except for us. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone was.
2009. 2009 was when we were doing this podcast.
Which sounds like it wasn't that long ago, but then like do some math and realize,
it's a very long time ago. Well, it's so long ago that the idea of a podcast was still pretty new. And you were the one pitching. I'm like, what is a who or the what now? Why
it's
are we
a radio
doing this?
show. It's an internet radio, I think.
And you put it up as an RSS feed. I never even saw the analytics. I never even knew if anybody was listening. You said people were listening. I think there was like 20 downloads.
It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot. But they were all from a different country. But so it's possible it got eaten. And we
were screaming into the void as always.
I do not think there is any vestige of it online. I don't even think you could find it if you tried.
No, I doubt it.
Which is probably for the best, if I'm being honest.
It's for the best. Yeah, it exists on my Dropbox.
He wouldn't even use his real name.
I would not.
He used a pseudonym because we are both in that industry tangential. Well, he's much more still in, but at the time we were kind of going for it and definitely did not want to be saying negative things, which is usually what we have to say. At the time online, it was pretty funny. So all of that said, here we are. It is the one time of year where musical theater and the theater takes center stage for an audience of its own people.
It still sort of exists on podcast.com. We are rated 4 out of 5 stars.
Okay.
But there are no episodes available, thank God.
Yeah, well, is the theme song?
No, nothing.
Nothing. Okay, well, for the, you know what? We're best when we're invisible, Keith. That's our best look.
There's an article on Julia Meinweld's website about recording the podcast. Oh, the picture of my apartment, hilarious. When we interviewed her and Rob Shapiro, that's so funny. All right. Anyway, nobody cares about this, Mike.
Yes. So, well, I mean, it does. It leads into what we're talking about. So, once a year, there's a broadcast, and it's called the Tony Awards, and it's time to talk about those because it just aired last Sunday, so we're a little bit behind, but I wanted to keep about it. We had that live show last week, and it was a back and forth. You might know, you might not know, dear listener, because the Writers Guild of America is still on strike, and the Tonys were canceled because in solidarity and because people write these things. These award shows are scripted television, and so lots of people are writing on them. However, Keith, I guess it's our show. We can talk about opinions. There are forces in our industry who decided that the commercial that the Tonys are, yes, it's a celebration. Yes, it's a way to award excellence in the theater. I don't diminish any of that. But it's also a giant commercial for Broadway, which is always needing fresh money to tourists and such to not just come to the theater, but also to buy these soundtracks and to see shows when they come on tour, all of those things.
Yeah, and it's essential.
Exposure is essential. So, and maybe you can talk about the machinations of this. Somehow, the Tony Award presentation on CBS and on Pluto TV were able to get a waiver from the WGA in order to do the broadcast, but they wouldn't be able to use any scripted nature. So
that's right.
Ariana DeBose, a superstar, was able to basically improv, and all of the presenters were improvising. I imagine she had an earpiece, and they were feeding her some stuff. But we're able to broadcast the broadcast. We're going to talk about it. But Keith, before we do that, do you know how it works? Because I know that there was some discourse online where people thought that regardless of the necessity financially to have this broadcast, that we should stay in solidarity with our WGA partners, and that the mighty green dollar took charge in order to work some backroom deals to get this waiver. So do you know how any of that works? I do not.
Well, I mean, I don't think it works in any sort of a mysterious way. It was the Broadway League negotiating with the WGA and trying to find a way to make this happen. And I think that the greater good was served by doing the show. Obviously, from Broadway's standpoint, the Tonys are absolutely essential to the health and success of the entire theater industry, with repercussions spanning out in decades, right? A Tony performance for a show might be the reason that a community theater is doing the show 15 years later, right? It is absolutely, it's not just for the shows currently running, it's not just for the tours, it's for every regional production, summer stock production, high school production. It is absolutely essential that these performances happen. But I also think from the WGA's perspective, they are going to get more attention by the fact that it was addressed on the show over and over and over again, supporting their position, that it was way better and got way more exposure and supported them way better to have it there on TV addressed. This looks different the entire time. You can tell it is different. Here is why it is different. We are supporting these, both the show itself, as well as some of the winners and their speeches addressed it. So to those thinking that it was a bad thing that it happened, from the standpoint of the WGA, if it were a bad thing for the WGA, they wouldn't have agreed to it. And so I think, honestly, and because there's a lot of overlap between WGA and Dramatists Guild members, like writers are writers, right? And so
and I think the way they presented it actually highlighted many of the ways in which writing is important.
100%.
People love and I really do think they threaded quite a bit of a needle. I'm going to drop a spoiler up top. I think this is the best Tony Awards broadcast in the past 5 years, if not more. It's hard to remember very far back because COVID kind of scrambled everything. But I think that it did what it's supposed to do, and it highlighted the best of our business, which can, you and I get lost because we're in it. We get lost in the weeds sometimes. And I think when you zoom out and look at just the community aspect of it and everybody firing on the same cylinder, it really is great. And I think one of the ways in which it achieved all those things, let's start at the top, is the opening number, in which there was a huge medley. And you might know from your previous Tonys or from your Academy Awards or from many ceremonial award shows. There's a very funny song and dance where they change some lyrics and they do some comedy skits and they do all kinds of great stuff. Now,
do a montage of stuff.
All of those things are written, right? All of those things are created and written. So what they did here was they did a medley nonetheless, but they had it almost exclusively music and dance.
Yeah, it was just dance. There was no lyrics.
And I think that served a lot of masters. You didn't have to have anybody write a whole montage of a mashup. And also, one of the things I find most magical about Broadway still is dancers dancing at the absolute pinnacle of their skill, which is a very small window. Whereas singers and such can have a much longer career. Dancers don't have that option.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And often it's still seen as song and dance. It's always a secondary part, and it's not often highlighted as the forefront. I think there are sometimes shows this year, in fact, had Bob Fosse's Dancin', which was a dance-focused show, and there are others. Contact won a bunch of Tonys years ago. Mm-hmm. Regardless, it put it front and center. Ms. DeBose is a dancer, or was known as a dancer first, and now is a megastar, but so it was awesome, and it was really great to see her working her ass off. All of those dancers working their ass off. My understanding is that some people from Bob Fosse's Dancin', which had closed recently, were in the ensemble. Got to show that, got to expose dance, and got to start the show off right. And I don't know if you had a take on that, Keith. I thought it was excellent.
No, I thought it was great. I thought it was really fun, and it was also very striking not to have any singing or lyrics, and to have it explained why. I think again how that's beneficial. Now, of course, is there a bit of an arbitrary line? Speaking as a writer of music and lyrics, you have to write the music too, and obviously they were using music that was already written. It was not written for the show, but the arrangements you write those too.
Yep.
I mean, it's like, and so. A bit of an arbitrary choice. However, I think for the purpose, I thought it was effective at demonstrating what they were trying to demonstrate. So I thought it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so then, the host went and she kind of did it on the fly. I'm imagining she had an earpiece to kind of just keep things in order sequentially. But
I don't think she did.
Yeah, it was
because that was a great moment where she had to introduce somebody else and had it written on her arm, but she sweated off, so she's like, "Here comes somebody."
It is
hilarious.
What she did, it was hosting any show is. I only think because Forever Plaid has the same bit in it, so it's a good bit when you have something written on your arm, but it's smeared off. Regardless, I don't know. I will say this on the whole. I think at times she was a bit too self-referential to the whole fact that we're doing it on the fly. It's a thing. I thought we maybe went to that well too often. However, that is small quibble aside, I thought it was a tour de force. This is the second time in a row she's just knocked it out. This woman is a just fierce, powerful energy, unflappable, dancing, presenting, improving, taking to the crowd, tossing it off, never being glib, honoring everyone. I really thought it was special. I thought all of the, often in these award shows, the presenters will come out and pretend that they're doing an ad hoc bit, but it's always just written clearly, and it's almost universally fails. I thought all these presenters kind of having to do it live served the whole piece and made it feel much more present and celebratory, in my opinion. And it, I don't know, it gave the vibe of live theater that you don't often get in a very packaged presentation.
Yeah.
No, I think rather than we promised we were going to take it easy today and not make a 6-hour podcast. So I just want to throw it to you, Keith. Give me some of your highlights. I'll throw you some of my highlights, and then we'll put a thumbs up, thumbs down on it, and let her go.
No, I mean, for me, the highlights are always very clearly the performances. The purpose of the show is the performances. And, back in the day, it was because there was 25, 30 million people watching it live and saw the performances live. Well, now that's not true. Not nearly as many people are watching it live, but each of these pieces are up on YouTube and become part of history. And you're always going to be finding watching those over and over and over and over again. And And so the live performances are always the highlights for me. And it's, you know, I don't know if people know sort of the backstage machinations of that, but it is incredibly difficult to do because there is not space for everybody here. You know, and in this version, they didn't bring in many of the set pieces, but they had the projection wall behind. They were able to like pretty well approximate the sets with a photorealistic projection behind. But back in the day, they had to move in, you know, pieces of the set to do this. It was crazy. But even for the actors, right? You know, you take the Some Like It Hot performance where there's 25, 30 actors all hoofing it there. Well, there's no room for them backstage. So all of these performances, these actors you see in this, the ones who weren't nominated are having to change. But the ensemble and everybody else are sitting on a bus down the, you know, across the street waiting for their performance. They go in, do it, get back on the bus. And that is their Tony night experience, which is really stressful. And the stakes are astronomically high. And, you know, it's a Sunday. At the very least, they've already done the show once, if not twice, by the time the Tonys happen. So it is a really difficult day. So any Tony Award performance that goes well is a miracle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. You know, I was happy for some of my friends who got, you know, who got name checked. A certain one of them got on screen. Certain Chancellor showed up on screen. I was happy about that. Yeah, Mike set it up.
Yeah, so, you know, as many people know, my wife was part of the revival of Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish, which had a bunch of different lives off Broadway, and is on the incredible cast recording, which you can get on your download service of choice. You should check it out. Incredible. But became very close, still very close friends with legendary director, performer Joel Grey, and they did a little package in the Pluto TV pre-show about Joel's lifetime achievement.
Act 1. It's not the pre-show. Hey, you know what? Hold on. Back up. We are not shitting on part 1 of the Tonys because that is when people like me, the writers, get our Tonys.
Not shitting on it.
If I win a Tony, it'll be on part 1. Part 1 is not less than part 2.
Not less, just not nationally broadcast. So
it is Pluto's national. Anyway, it should be part of the whole thing.
That's a conversation for a different podcast. I do like Pluto, by the way. Anyway, he got the Lifetime Achievement Award along with John Kander, and they did a package. And look, there you see Chancellor. She's on the
Chancellor
Tonys.
Jen.
Yeah. So now I've seen Jen on the Tonys, and she performed at the Drama Desk Awards. She's checking off that. Whatever that performance EGOT is.
Hey, we were there.
Yep.
We were both there at the Drama Desk.
So that was really cool. I also agree. The performances were incredible. My favorite, I think me and Jen love to do a ranking. I thought that Some Like It Hot had a really great number. The thing with choosing you have to choose one number to kind of encapsulate your show to an audience who might not know it, and that's tricky. I thought that Some Like It Hot did it very well. I thought that the New York number montage was pretty good. It was a pretty good montage of what that show might be. You didn't agree? Well, we can talk about it. I think the most effective for me was the Sweeney Todd. I thought Sweeney Todd, that opening number of Sweeney Todd is so atmospheric. Yeah. It showed, hey, we've got the full band and we are singing our faces into oblivion. And so and even Josh Groban, who I've heard from some critics that he's not scary enough, he's not this enough. I thought, I was like, all right, I'll take it, I'll buy it.
I love that. I mean, I think this year all the music was tracked because I don't think it was possible to do in that theater. They were in a smaller theater. I don't think they had the orchestra there at all.
Well, you know, that to that point, in the past couple of years, in fact, one of my biggest problems, especially on CBS, is the sound has generally been pretty terrible. But this year, gangbusters. Sounded great. The mix was great. They could clearly hear themselves. There wasn't too much like pitchiness and whatnot. It was pretty solid.
Yeah. My only problem with Sweeney, and I not in 1,000 years will I say which one of them, but one of the performers I've worked with, I'm like, that is one of the most terrible human beings I've ever met. I'm like, oh, there he is.
More than a few of those people on stage, I'm sure. I would say for me, the least effective performance for me was the shucked performance. I don't.
Oh, that's so funny.
You thought
I loved it.
Yeah, see, it's a lot of dad jokes and corn humor and whatnot. I think from what I've heard,
the show.
I know, and from what I've heard, the show's very effective and works. And but when you juxtapose it in the moment with amongst some of the other performances, the humor didn't read to me, and it didn't like it's. I can compare it to the year, I can't remember what year it was, where Urinetown performed, which is a similar comedic vibe, not the same, but similar. And it was very effective. It really, its tone, it was like, oh, this is the show. It didn't work as much for me and Shuck, but it seems to be doing okay. So
interesting. Well, I mean, this is where theater's subjective.
Yes,
right?
Very much so.
When I was looking for what I thought was the most effective performance, I might have put Shucked in the top 2 or 3.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't feel
because
that way.
Oh, I see what this is. This looks like it's fun. And talking about trying to encapsulate your show into 3 or 4 minutes, as well as the perfect song to encapsulate your show might not include the person who's just about to win a Tony.
Yeah.
For you, so you have to figure out a way to also feature your big star, even if that's not the best way to encapsulate your show. It's fascinating.
Now, I will say that I haven't seen Shucked, so it's hard to say whether or not but I just didn't feel like it didn't make me psyched to go see it. So I didn't think it was a bad number. I have seen Kimberly Akimbo, and I thought their performance, whilst probably not the number I would have picked, it gave you a very good sense of who those characters are and what the central love story is in that show, or the central relationship in that show is. And so I thought that it was pretty good. And Victoria Clark obviously is doing her thing. And I think it was pretty good. What was the other? Oh, I'm happy to say it on the internet. Guys, we got to stop. We got to stop beating the Sweet Caroline horse. I just... Every bit of marketing, every bit of performance that the Neil Diamond Show has done, and look, I love me Neil Diamond. My first concert I ever went to, Neil Diamond. Love Neil Diamond. That's not my favorite number of his. We got to be doing something. It's just not a Sweet Caroline sing-alongs, people doing an impression. For me, even the shots to the audience, they should not have shown, because it was clearly a bunch of Broadway people being like, why are we doing this? It was not good.
That's a tough one. I've seen the show, and I mean, it's the big hit, but I don't think that performance told us anything about the show.
No, it's a biography about Neil Diamond, ostensibly. As well.
It is. Yeah. It is, and there are pieces of it that are more interesting, from a playwriting standpoint. There are pieces, I mean, in some ways, it's a very sort of standard biomusical, whatever, but that performance, I agree with you. It was like, okay, that could have been on a cruise ship or it could have been a Vegas impersonator, whereas the show is much more than that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that did not represent the show as well either.
Parade did a performance that was, I love that song. I think I'm so happy that Parade is getting its due, because the Hal Prince production, the original production, was very gigantic. It was very... What happens to Hal Prince productions sometimes, which is like the immensity of it, I think detracts from the story. And I love that score, and I'm so happy it's so popular. I thought that was a great performance. I have Ben Platt, whatever you think of Ben Platt, and there are people on both sides of his cheering squad. He puts 180% of his heart and soul into every time he opens his mouth, and that was 100%. Very apparent. And to do that on the grandest stage is something. They closed the performances with Lea Michele doing
"Don't Rain on My Parade,"
which
from Funny Girl,
which reached out of the television screen and punched you in the face. She's incredible. And to do that live with all that pressure on is pretty incredible. It's hard, if you know any of the story, not to feel a little heart hurt for Miss Feldstein.
Amy Feldstein.
Yeah. Because they basically just like erased her face from the whole experience. And also, if you're looking to see Funny Girl, don't sleep on Julie Benko, who's apparently also a revelation.
I saw her. Uh-huh. I saw her. She was terrific.
So, if you can get tickets that way, see her. But I thought that was a cool look. I thought the Tonys were really good, and my heart was lifted with how great it felt and to celebrate. And the ratings were as middling as they've been in past years. So it's not like it reached a huge audience, but it did enough, I think, to keep it on television, which is what I'm hoping.
Right, exactly. I mean, it doesn't. What matters is that the clips of the show performances get out.
Yeah, and they're all available on YouTube, on the Tonys YouTube channel. So if you don't want to sit through 4 hours, go watch them.
Go watch the performances, yeah.
And I can't remember who said it. I think it was Ariana, so it doesn't matter. One of the messages that kept getting pushed, aside from the support of the WGA, was that Broadway, the term, does not mean you have to come to New York to see these shows. Keith and I talk about these shows, and you don't have to. A lot of these shows are or will be on national tour, which play a lot of roadhouses in A, B, and C cities. So you shouldn't have to travel more than an hour or two to go see it, to go see one of these Broadway shows on tour. But I will go further than to say that. Now, listen, I'm a card-carrying member of Actors Equity, proud union member, support my union and champion all of the shows and the work they do for the most part. I will say this, however, though. Go support live theater regardless of its union status. If there's a community diner, if there's a dinner theater near you, get a ticket. I guarantee you those kids on that stage are giving you everything they got. And you might get a good meal out of it. You might see something funny. Maybe there is just Google theater near me and go see it. There is nothing. I have a friend who posted some clips recently. He's working at the Pines Dinner Theater here in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster or Allentown, Pennsylvania. A nothing, nowhere theater in the middle of nowhere, Keith. They're doing Pump Boys and Dinettes, which you would go is... And guess what? They are given every honky-tonk bit of their souls every night in that performance. If you got something near you, go see it. I think that's the whole point we're pointing here. The musical theater is a very special American art form, and you should support it when possible.
I mean, live theater, period.
Yes.
And, theater is sacred. Live theater is sacred. And it doesn't matter when and where or how. And you just never know what's going to touch you. Community theater can do that. Mm-hmm. It really is. It doesn't matter. And it is, obviously it has set the path of both of our lives, mm-hmm. right? Seeing... do you remember the first show that you saw live that really opened your mind, really blew your mind?
I do, but I'll go even before that. I remember the first live thing I saw, really, where I was like old enough to know what was happening, and that was a community theater production, The King of Prussia Players, in the auditorium of the high school at the time, doing a production of Pirates of Penzance, and. Gilbert and Sullivan, very funny, witty, lots happening. But at my age, I had no idea what they were saying. I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea that it was fun. I had no idea of anything. But seeing a huge group of people presenting such energy live so close, it was so palpable. I remember being excited about that. And then the first road show I saw was the Secret Garden on tour, which... I remember falling in love with. But then the first time it was seeing Rent before I moved to New York on tour. I had no idea. I just saw the billboards driving back from work with my dad. And I'll never forget, we would drive the stretch of 95 in Philadelphia that just collapsed, as a matter of fact. There was a billboard that just said Rent, No Day But Today, and a phone number. And it was there forever. And finally, I just called the number. I was like 15 years old, 16 years old, whatever. And got tickets. We went to see it, and everything was different after that. I mean, everything was different after that. And what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first professional production I saw was the Phantom Tour in Montreal. I've talked about that before. I think the first big theater thing that I saw was the community theater in Burlington, Vermont, Lyric Theater. Which I subsequently did a bunch of shows with in the 90s. I'm trying to remember what the first one I saw might have been Annie. I definitely saw in 88, Superstar in 89. I saw Guys and Dolls in 90. And the next year I was doing one. But that their productions, again, we're talking about, like, it doesn't have to be these community theater productions put on phenomenal work. And I definitely was like, just being in the theater itself, is a Flynn Theater in Burlington. And you're just like, wow, it just blew my mind. And I remember, like, I would insist on getting there the minute the house opened, because I just wanted there to just smell the theater of it all and read the program for the full half hour if I could.
I still feel that way. Even having, knowing the behind the scenes machinations and having some, I don't want to say bitterness, but some grouch about the whole thing here and there. There's something about the vibe of it, the front of house people, the stage management. I like to sit in the back of the house and hearing small little jitters from the sound booth or from the spot ops or the speed, like knowing that it's not just the people on stage. It's this whole magical alchemy that is and it's every night. Broadway, they're doing it 8 times a night, sometimes twice a day. And it's nerve wracking. It's never just like roll out and just get her done. It's never that.
Never, ever, ever. No. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. Like, feeling all the departments firing up. It's an entire ecosystem coming alive in that half hour before the show happens. And it's cool.
Even the Disney shows that seem to be so prepackaged and done, there's probably someone making their Broadway debut tonight, or someone who's never gone on this track having to swing in, and then 6 other people have to redo. There's always an anthill like exploding underneath the stage, and it's always exciting.
There's always something unique happening, from the performance standpoint. And I always say this, and Jesus, we need to move on.
Yes, we do.
But I always say this as a performer, to myself and to the other performers in the show or whatever. It doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter what the show is, it doesn't matter how good or how bad it is, whatever. That in the house. Yeah. It's 500, 1,000 people, 2,000 people, who knows?
50
people. There's a good chance that this is somebody's first ever show. Mm-hmm. And there's a chance it's somebody's last ever show. Mm-hmm. And so I always go out there, I think, first and last, right? It is sacred and an important duty. I don't care how bad the show is. I don't care how mad you are at the director or the stage manager. It might be somebody's first show. It might be somebody's last show. And that is a sacred duty. You got to give it.
So I went to see at the place where you came to see me in Perfect Change, Keith. They were doing production of Hello, Dolly, and I had some pals in it, so I went to see it. And
they did Hello, Dolly in that
I got to tell you what, buddy. It was a very, like, the tone, I thought it was going to be just a catastrophe because it's too big and a small space. And they knew exactly what it was more of a tribute to Hello, Dolly. It was the whole show, full show, no cuts, but different podcast. Point being, I'm like, I got my hat on, my glasses, whatever. I'm kind of incognito, and I'm sitting in the house afterwards, waiting, or in the lobby waiting for my pals to come say, hi, great job, before I take off after the show. And this woman comes up to me, and I just think she's going to say good job, because old people just think if you're young, you were in the show. And she goes, seriously, right?
That's a fair bet.
And she said, she had this older gentleman. They weren't old, but there was a couple. And she says, hey, were you in that show with the driving? And I said, I love you, you're perfect, now change. And I said, yeah, I was. She says, yeah. And she's like, I just got to tell you, we took a flyer on that show, and you were so funny that my husband, she pointed to him over there, made us get season tickets the past 2 seasons. And I said, oh. And it dawned on me, I was like, my one performance, one night, and now this theater these people are into live theater. So like that responsibility is a legit thing, even in the smallest of
I feel it very strongly.
Okay,
all right,
so
let us move forward.
I just wanted to mention something. We talk about a lot of TV and music and different stuff on the podcast, but and once you had mentioned, I think, Rachel Maddow's podcast on the show as your thing. And I recently listened to a podcast on a whim that I want to quickly mention, and it's called Sympathy Pains, and it is just such an interesting story. It's a shorter podcast. I think it's 6 episodes, so it's not like a huge commitment. And I just want to read you the synopsis so as not to give too much away. Hosted by Laura Beale. She also hosts Dr. Death and Bad Batch, which are great true crime podcasts if you're into it. Sympathy Pains is a 6-part series from Neon, Hum Media, and iHeartRadio. For 20 years, Sarah Delaschmidt told people around her that she had cancer, muscular dystrophy, and other illnesses. She used a wheelchair, posted selfies from a hospital bed, told friends and coworkers she was trapped in abusive relationships, or that she was the mother of children who had died. None of that is real. It was all a con. Sympathy was both a great need and her powerful weapon. But unlike most scams, she didn't want people's money. She just wanted something far more valuable. That's the craziest part of this whole thing. So I have an interest, because things that you can't conceptually, like, what's the word? Empathize with, I can't find in my heart, like, I find fascinating to try to wrap my head around. So, Munchausen by proxy, it's a subject that's always interested in me. Like, people, it's a type of abuse of your child, making them pretending they're sick to garner that sympathy from the outside world. But in a lot of cases in Munchausen, you actually are making them sick. You're creating an illness in order to get, which is a weird thing. So I find that fascinating, if not horrific. This is different, though. This is a person doing it themselves. And the reason it spoke to me and I wanted to listen to this is because I used to work at a camp. My brother, sister, and I worked at a camp and ran a camp that dealt with special needs children. And in an attempt to bridge the gap between quote-unquote mainstream day camp and what camp was when we were coming up as youth counselors, which was like take the kids with special needs who couldn't fit into the mainstream activities and just stick them in a room and play a movie, basically, right?
Right.
And we just thought that was so horrific, and so we started this camp where it was just full integration and find a way. If one of our blind campers wanted to play kickball, well, we'll find a way to make that happen, which was great, but also quickly became far out of, because we were not trained in this. We didn't, the insurance machinations were, and greatest time of my life in many ways. And eventually we were able to like sell it off to the township who could do it the right way. But regardless, to think that one of those campers that we were like changing, doing a lot of sensitive physical support with, let's just leave it there, would be faking it is mind-blowing. So this person, Sarah, for years she pretended to be a quadriplegic, Keith, and would go to this camp where they would change her. They would help her go to the bathroom. They would take care of her after she would go to the bathroom. All of these things. And she wasn't even sick. I mean, she wasn't even physically sick. And so then, I'll let this story play out for you on the podcast, but just think about the natural resolution of that. When you get found out, let's say you can't sue a person for they made me wipe their ass.
Yeah.
You can't sue them. There is zero recourse. So this is a crime with zero consequence, really. And yet maybe more just trauma caused than you can really quantify.
I mean, weirdly, I have sympathy for the person so desperate for human connection, they would play it out that way. And it's like, it really is, it's obviously disordered, but it is like what we will do to feel connection and to be pitied or sympathized is, it is, look, how many times have we played up being sick sometime or like, this bad thing happened and you tell the story and like, we all go through stuff and like, it's really just taking let me tell you the story of my grandmother dying one click further, or 30 clicks further. But it is part of the human condition. It's fascinating.
So anyway, you can find it. It aired exclusively on iHeartRadio originally, but now it's on all podcast services. And it's, it's not the greatest leap. It's not bad. It's not the best podcast I've ever listened to, but it's absolutely worth a 6-episode listen or whatever it might be. I think it's 4 episodes. And they each focuses on a different victim of this person. And then it kind of coalesces in the where it stands now, was she found out, all those kinds of things. Definitely worth a listen on a jog or during a drive or whatnot. That's Sympathy Pains. It's on your podcast services of choice. Keith, let's close things up here with a weekly rad. Hit me up.
Yeah, all right. Well, my weekly rad is we are recording this on Juneteenth. So as a way to celebrate that, my weekly rad is as an example of Black excellence, and that is my surgeon, Dr. Sharon Lawrence, who did my hernia surgery and did a fantastic job, and I'm feeling a lot better. And it is definitely, obviously we're a couple of white guys, but we definitely want to commemorate and to celebrate people doing fantastic work. So I'm feeling better. I was able to do some yard work. Maybe did a little too hard, but that's me. I can't help myself. But that was a way that my life was made better. So that is my weekly rad.
I'm so happy that my company has begun, the company I work for, because not all companies do this. I worked for a company previously. I'll leave them out of it, but they started giving Juneteenth off under the guise of something else. I think it was they called it like a flex day or something, whatever it was, without having to sort of like address it specifically. Right. But my company now, they sent out this big bulletin, and we had a whole Zoom meeting where people spoke, and there was a really specific recognition, and we have the today off. And I thought that was, we say it all the time, representation, even acknowledgement is a step forward, and I'm glad that we're getting somewhere. There is movement in a direction. Let's put it that way. Lastly, I just want to point out I had the worst couple days.
Yeah.
Jen and I have been talking about getting a puppy, rescuing a dog. Eventually, when we buy a house, some things coalesced, and all of a sudden we found ourselves meeting this puppy, and we agreed to take the puppy, but then we needed a couple days to puppy-proof our apartment. And then in those ensuing days, we realized that it's not a fear-based thing. It's a responsibility you take on when you adopt an animal. And we realized that our current situation and our current situation were not fair to raising a puppy. And so we had to pull out. We ended up donating the adoption fee to I feel great about the decision, but it's still like a bit of a
challenge,
a kick in the ass, because you're like, you feel like you let something down, but truthfully we did the right thing, and I feel good about it. So as we're dealing with that, my brother's on vacation, and his first dog, he has a pack of dogs. I think they had 8 dogs at one point.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. They remind me of a certain someone you live with that just keep seeing invalid dogs and have to adopt them or rescue them. There's always a post from Jillian.
It's only one.
I know, but she always makes a post where she's like, somebody rescue this dog or I have to do it.
100%. Yeah. No, absolutely.
My brother's that way, only they get the dogs.
They get the dog, yeah.
Yeah, so, but their first dog he had bought when his kids were children, it was the puppy, is this dog Thor, and Thor went through the divorce with my brother, and then all of a sudden he was an only dog for 8 years, and all of a sudden there were 8 more dogs, and it was a lot of challenges for him. In fact, at one point he was getting a little aggressive because he was challenging all these dogs into a space, and we almost took him on, but we couldn't because we had an apartment. But through it all, that dog, I've always felt like he was kind of my dog a bit too. And and he never showed his teeth to me. He never growled. He was just like, he was so great to me. And even when they had all these other dogs and the situation was great, he and I always had a bond. And my brother's on vacation, and he got diagnosed with cancer about 2 months ago, and he only had 3 months to go. And it was
the dog.
And it was a big conversation about whether they wanted to go on vacation or not while he was sick, and they decided to wait to put him down until they got back, all this stuff. Anyway, get a phone call yesterday. The dog walker's like, I don't know what to do. He won't get up. So I go over to my brother's house. The dog's just kind of like can't move his legs. He's just sitting in a pile of his own filth. And
yeah, time.
It's time. And I've never been faced with that situation by myself. Luckily, CEO Jen was with me. And so I had all these triggers from when my dog was sick. All this like emotional blockage. That's my sort of don't look, close my eyes and shake my head is kind of my emotional wall.
Sure.
But I had felt that way with my dog, and I just knew that, like, maturity, right? You get older. I realized this isn't about me. This is about doing what's right for my friend. And so I decided in that moment what needed to be done. And so we were able to get him up. He's a bigger dog. Get him up and outside. We got the hose. We put it on cool, mist. It took the 45 minutes to just like rinse him off because he was covered in it was nasty. Bad, yeah. We got him nice and clean. We dried him off. We got him some water. We sat on the grass with a cool breeze, and we just sat there for a while. And he kind of like had his last few moments being an outside dog and like feeling great. And then we got him into the car, took him over to the place, and Blue Pearl Medical Animal Hospital, I think they're nationwide, they couldn't have been greater. They couldn't have been more professional and respectful. And, as hard it was, I just like held this dog, I made sure I kept eye contact, and they did what they do. And he went very peacefully and quietly. And I just think, I guess my weekly rad here is just thankful for these places, animal hospitals and everyone involved, that create a very respectful, peaceful way to go about this very difficult decision. And I guess it's funny, I left and I was like, you know what? That's kind of how I'd love to go. Just like a few people who care about you, just being with you and then peacefully going. That's what it was.
It's terribly cruel that that is the one way in which we treat animals better than humans.
Yeah, it was a great send off. And so my weekly rad is like, animals can't ask the favor. So for any of you out there who have had to do the favor or are having to go through that, that was a really hard thing to do, but I'm so thankful I was able to do that for my buddy. So
yeah, it's it's so hard. It is the worst, and obviously, we went through it here this year as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean but it is part of the responsibility of having a pet.
Yeah.
Of having a companion is you're in all likelihood going to outlive them, and they're going to need you. Going to need you at this time just as much as they needed you as a puppy.
Yeah. So anyway, that experience yesterday made me realize, like, didn't need a puppy right now. So that was the right choice. All right, folks. So we'll see you next week. Sorry to end it on a bummer, but love sometimes hurts, man. That's the way it is. In the meantime, keep on doing the things you find fun. Don't let anyone yuck your yum. And until next time, keep on geeking on.